You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, I speak with professional triathlete Cameron Dye. We talk about some of his 2016 successes, including his win at the New York City Tri, and we also talk about the Island House Tri, where he placed second, and it's a very interesting race format. I hope you enjoy. Cam, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, Adam, thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
So why don't we start off with walking us through your athletic background and how you decided to turn triathlon into a profession?
Well, I was always an athletic kid growing up. PE was always my favorite subject in school, and played soccer and baseball and swam when I was a little kid. Focused on swimming about the time I turned 12, which was more my decision than my parents or anybody else. I just decided I wanted to focus on swimming, and at the time the goal was the Olympics. Swam all the way through high school. Ended up going to the University of Iowa on a swimming scholarship. So completed that part of the goal. Right about that time, realized my Olympic dreams of swimming were probably a little unrealistic, and it was halfway through my high school experience in 2000 when triathlon first got in the Olympics. That definitely piqued my interest. I'm from Boulder, Colorado originally. A lot of people move to Boulder to train, but this is home sweet home for me. And so growing up here and seeing the likes of, Tim DeBoom and Matt Reed, Simon Lessing, those guys that live, train here, watching Tim win in Kona in the late 90s, early 2000s, sort of piqued my interest in the sport. I ran cross country in high school as well. And my sophomore year when I was 15, my high school swim coach, Bob Smart, he arranged for me to get a TT bike and actually do the Boulder Peak, sort of as my first intro to triathlon. I did a small pool triathlon in Fort Collins just to sort of try it out, and then took on the challenge of the Boulder Peak. And as a 15-year-old, won the 15 to 19 age group, had the fastest swim of the whole race, sort of fell in love with it, and kind of decided then that I wanted to continue to pursue swimming through college. Obviously triathlon's not a college sport, so there's no opportunities for scholarships or any of that, and wanted to see how far I could go with swimming, but always in the back of my mind kind of decided I was going to move back to Boulder after school and give triathlon a go. So did that, moved back to Boulder in 2006 after college, and spent a summer very, very poor, working 5 or 6 different part-time jobs and eating a lot of ramen noodles and sort of traveling around on a shoestring budget and collecting my pro card. After that, I guess, like they say, it's history.
Yeah, that's great. So do you find the swimming background helpful? Obviously, with the swimming leg, you can put up a fast time, but did it also help establish a really good cardio base and that endurance base and I guess training and discipline and that kind of thing? Did it really help lend itself to becoming a pro triathlete?
Oh, absolutely. I think you hit on it right there that, it prepares you physically. You're used to training and you're used to putting in the work. But I think the biggest part of swimming in particular, just the way it's done in the U.S. is, you start doing 2-a-days and 5 a.m. practices when you're 14, 15, if you want to be at the pointy end of the field. So having had that experience and that discipline, and then swimming in college and learning what that's like to try and juggle, a full academic schedule and then 2 practices a day and traveling to meets. And I think all of that was super helpful in learning how to manage my time, learning how to mentally prepare for things. Obviously there's a lot of highs and lows when you're training that often at a young age, and just learning to, take every day for what it is. And you have good days, you have bad days, and you can't really get too excited about the good days, and you can't get too down about the bad days. And you just sort of try and maintain an even keel. And I think swimming was definitely a huge part in my ability of learning to do that.
Yeah.
And then that transferred well into triathlon. And like you say, once you start racing triathlons, you got to be in the race to win the race, and being able to come out of the water at the front or with the leaders at least puts you in a good position.
So let's talk about your 2016 season, and maybe we could start off with St. Anthony's. That's an early season race, and one where there's always a really good pro field there, and one that I actually did this year too. So technically you and I raced, but you beat me and then went to the hotel, showered up, had lunch, and then I finished. So, but it was you had an impressive day, and so just walk us through that. I mean, why is that one of those races where professionals show up to, and obviously it's early season, so a beautiful course in the St. Petersburg area. But just talk about that for a minute.
Sure. St. Anthony's it's a very historic race. I mean, it's got a huge following. It's been around for, I believe it's 35 years now. Consecutively. So it's been around for a really long time. Pretty much anybody that has ever raced pro triathlon has done it at some point. And I think the biggest thing is it sort of has always been the kickoff to the North American racing season. Like you say, it's the end of April. So it's about the time that a lot of the Aussies and Kiwis have come over to the U.S. for the season. The Americans are starting to race, winter's sort of over depending on where you live. It's always sort of been, I liken it to a lot of the classics in cycling. It's sort of the Paris-Roubaix, if you will, of triathlon, where it's that first race where everybody's going to be there. It's going to be your first chance to see, who's fit, who's fat, what happened during the off season, and who's ready to go. And for me personally, it's always been a really special race because it was my first major win as a pro. Back in 2010, I won that race, and second place was second place was Greg Bennett, and third place was Craig Alexander. So it was sort of the first time I'd ever beaten the best of the best, and it was,
that's good company.
For me, sort of the tipping point in my professional career. Yeah, no, exactly. And it was the tipping point in my pro career where it went from like, okay, this is a dream, this is what I want to do, to all of a sudden, wow, I'm actually doing this. I can do this. So for me, that was just a monumental moment in my career. And this year's race was no different. I mean, it's, like you say, it's a beautiful area. St. Petersburg is awesome. The Mad Dog Tri team down there does a fantastic job of hosting the pros. They do homestays for anybody that wants them, and, massive community down there of triathletes. So it's always fun to go back. I actually have lots of relationships there that have been going for all 10 years of my pro career. But this year was good. I mean, the weather was nice. It wasn't super windy, which has been an issue in the past there. They've had to cancel a couple swims. And it wasn't too windy on the bike, so it was a good day to go fast. And then it wasn't super hot either. So, I mean, as far as the race goes, it was a fantastic day. I'm sort of a one-trick pony. I go out really, really hard and ride really, really hard and then see if anybody can catch me. And so this year was no different. Had a good swim, came out right on Brian Fleischman's feet, jumped on the bike and tried to just get as much distance as fast as I could from the fast runners. Came off the bike with a solid lead. I think I rode my fastest bike split ever. So of all the years I've done it, this year was the fastest bike split. And certainly not having a windy day helps with that. But, felt good coming off the bike and then had a good enough run to stick the win. So it was a great start for the season for me. It's always nice to go down there to the same race, same time of year, same course. And you can sort of go apples to apples with where you are this year versus where you were last year at this time. And it's certainly a good way to start the season. I mean, I was very pleased with the effort, and obviously anytime you can win a big race, it's fantastic. And it's the third time I've won that race. So that's definitely one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, it's a great race. And like you said, it's early in the season, and so you can kind of test yourself to see where you are in terms of your cardio and endurance and stuff. So one question though, I mean, this year wasn't too hot, but you're in Boulder, I'm in New York City, and so April is still chilly. Do you do anything specific to prepare for the heat when for that early season heat, or you just sort of, you have the fitness and the experience and you just kind of gut it out if it's too hot? Definitely being in Boulder in April, you can still have 2 feet of snow sometimes. And so I guess the biggest thing we do is, when you do ride inside, try and avoid, flipping on the fan right away and let yourself actually get a real good sweat going. The other thing is spending some time in the dry sauna. Yeah.
Just 10, 15 minutes after my last workout of the day, couple times a week for sort of the month leading into the race. I mean, they've done plenty of research on it, and there's very specific protocols you can follow. I've sort of loosely followed that, and it's been more of just like after that last workout of the day, go in there and sit for 10, 15 minutes, and then hop out and try not to pound a ton of water right before I go in, try not to pound a ton of water right before I come out, just sort of let your body do its thing and learn to sweat and then learn to cool itself down a little bit. And I've found that helps. I don't think it's by any means, the silver bullet to racing in the heat when you're not living in the heat.
Yeah.
In a lot of respects, you do just sort of have to gut it out, and you just have to be smart. I think the biggest thing, especially coming from Boulder with the altitude and it's so dry here in the winter, is that you have to make sure you're hydrated the week leading up to the race. I mean, people are always really good about drinking lots, the day or 2 days before the race. But if you've been chronically dehydrated for the whole week leading up to that, it's sort of hard for your body to catch up. So I think that's as much of a key as anything, is just being hydrated, before the race even starts, making sure you're topped up on your fluids and your salts and your electrolytes and all that stuff. But yeah, there's little things you can do. I think for me, I did 70.3 down in Puerto Rico in March last year. And that was a lot more of a challenge just because of the distance. St. Anthony's, it's an Olympic distance race. For me, it's a little under 2 hours. So it's not, you don't quite ever get to that point where the heat really can kill you the way it can in a longer race. So I was a little bit more cognizant of the heat going into Puerto Rico just because of the distance. But, those are the two things I think you got to do the best job at. You got to make sure you're hydrated before the race, and that whole week leading up. And then you got to make sure you're smart about drinking during the race. And then, the sauna, it works. I don't know if it's a placebo effect, but it seems to help a little bit for sure.
Yeah, I on this podcast, I did an interview recently with a guy who kind of specializes in desert races and extreme running races and things, and he stays in the sauna up to 50 to 60 minutes for the Sahara Desert race and things that he trained for. So, and he's from the military, and he claims there's solid research that says it works. So, sounds like a good plan. I mean, I guess you don't need to do 50, 60 minutes because he's doing ultra marathons, but still, even 15 minutes, that acclimation would help. So let's talk about New York City, because I'm from New York City, so I get to watch that race every year. I haven't ever raced it, actually, surprisingly, but I usually watch it, and I know a lot of people in it. And so actually I got to interview Ben Collins recently, and so he beat you in 2015, and then you came back in 2016 and won. So can you compare and contrast those races for me, sort of what you learned in 2015 that then you applied in 2016 to come back and have a great result?
Sure. Yeah. 2015 was the second time I'd ever done the race, but it was the first time I had finished the race. I'd gone in 2014 and got a flat like a mile into the bike, and that was sort of the end of the day for me. But 2015, I had a good swim, let out of the water, rode really hard. Me and Ben rode basically side by side for the entire 40K. And then we ran side by side for probably 8.5K of the 10K. I think I sort of tried to over strategize the race. There's not many times where I've come off the bike with somebody and then run with them for any amount of time. In most cases, I either come off and whoever's catching me is going dramatically faster and passes me, or I come off in the front and kind of stay away. So on the one hand, it was great to run with somebody and be pushed. But that course through Central Park is deceptively hard.
Yeah.
And I think just strategically, I botched it and tried to go too hard on the uphills early on in the race. And sort of, I'd go hard up the hill, I'd put a gap in, and then he'd sort of claw his way back before the next hill. And then I'd go again. And in the end, I basically just ended up breaking myself, and had to, he finally went by me and I just couldn't do anything about it. And last year, I didn't do anything dramatically different. I mean, I let out of the water again. I rode super hard. I think the times were very comparable to the year before, but for whatever reason, he didn't have as good of a day. And I was able to get a couple minutes on him on the bike and then just run smart, having learned a lot from the year before. I was a little bit more steady on the uphills, tried to really focus on the downhills and the increased speed there. And just played it smarter and was able to stay away. So, I mean, I think as much as anything, I beat myself in 2015, and I mean, hats off to him. He had a good race, but I think I definitely, if I could do it over again, I would have strategically done it significantly differently on the run.
Yeah.
So did some smarter things last year and was able to come away with a victory.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know Central Park, there is a loop that has quite a bit of hills, and that's where I train a lot. So I know it very well, and it's actually a brutal, deceptively brutal loop, actually. So I can feel your pain that first year. So
yeah, no, it's hard.
Yeah. So why don't we switch and talk about the Island House race that you did this year, and that's quite an interesting race because it's over 3 days, and it's kind of an interesting format that ultimately, I guess, the goal is to challenge the triathlete in as many ways as possible to get to finally find out who is the, I guess, all-around best triathlete. I guess that's the goal. But can you just talk about that race a little bit, and in terms of the format, and then maybe about how you went about kind of the strategy going into it of how you went about it?
Sure. Yeah. No, Island House is it's an awesome event. I mean, it's probably hands down the most fun I've ever had doing triathlon. Like you say, it's a 3-day race, basically a stage race for triathlon. The first day was standalone swim, bike, and run. Sprint distances, so it was a 750 swim, and then we had about an hour, and then we had a 20K bike, and then we had about an hour, and then you had a 5K run.
That sounds like pain.
So the first day was basically, the first day was trying to go really, really fast over and over. And a huge part of that was just recovery, trying to be smart in between things. And then the second day was a mass start race. There was a GC leader after the first day, so we all added everybody's times up, and there was a top 10 list. Everybody mass started on the second day, and then we had a 750 swim into a 5K run, into a 40K bike, back into the water for another 750, and then another 5K. So it was painful, to say the least. If you've seen some of the video clips, people coming out of the water just grabbing everything because everything was cramped up the second time around.
Yeah.
It was the tagline, the hashtag was pain in paradise, and that day sort of exemplified that. But then after the second day, they had the times for the second day. They added those with the first day, and there was 20 men and 20 women had started the race, and the top 10 after the second day, the combined times, moved on to the third day, which was the final, which was actually out on Highborn Key, which is Mark Holowesko's private island. The first 2 days were in Nassau, where the Island House Hotel actually is. But that third day, we went out to his private island and duked it out in a sprint distance race. It was just a normal swim, bike, run, 750, 20K, 5K. But the start order was a time trial start in the order of the seedings. So the first guy went, and then I was in second place, so I started, I think it was 1 minute and 5 seconds behind him. And then third place started 39 seconds behind me. And you basically just went off at your deficit, and then it was going to be whoever crossed the line first was the overall winner.
That's so cool.
So it's a super cool format. It was a lot of fun. I mean, you're constantly being challenged, like you say, in a different way all the time, whether it's trying to swim as fast as you can, or trying to swim after you've already done a triathlon and you've dived back into the water. And it's definitely the best test I've ever seen of, like you say, an all-around triathlete, because just being a good swimmer or a good cyclist or a good runner is not going to win the race. And on top of that, you got to be consistent too, because you have to put it together for 3 straight days.
Yeah.
So it's a fun format. I think it's great, both for the athletes and for the spectators. I mean, obviously there's not a whole lot of spectators at the race on Highborn Key, but they have a TV show that'll be coming out, I believe, in January. There was a lot of Periscope coverage, and they did a pretty good job of covering it live while it was going on. But it's an exciting format, and I think one of the other cool factors for it was Luke McKenzie and his wife Beth are the race directors. They're both pro triathletes. I mean, Luke's been second at Kona, and Beth's won a couple Ironmans, I believe. But they did a really good job of coming up with 20 men and 20 women of basically every background you could think of, from, Ironman world champions to ITU world champions, and sort of everything in between. So it's a true triathlon race. It's not, it's not an ITU race. It's not a long course race. It's a little bit of everything. Everybody's on TT bikes. Everybody's on their own. The whole thing's non-drafting. And I think it was a really, really good race. It's fun. It hurts. But it hurts in kind of that weird, sick way that triathletes like to seem to hurt.
Yeah, for a sport where people love to suffer and focus on suffering, this is like the ultimate format. So I was going to ask, like, who came up with this concept, because it's perfectly built for the sick way triathletes think about things, or all endurance athletes for that fact. But interesting format.
Absolutely.
And I love the fact that they had the to get into the third day to actually win this thing. You combine the first 2 days, so it prevented people from tanking, which I think is genius. And then having that start on the third day where it's staggered based on the deficits is amazing, because that just makes that finish line just incredible. So yeah, the format is really, really interesting and awesome. So in terms of, this format, obviously recovery is a big piece of this. And so most of us don't need to worry about recovering for 1 hour between, a swim or a bike or whatever. But do you have any tips or anything on recovery that, you would offer up to an amateur to say, what things that you do or you see that work well to be able to kind of respond on the next day or a few days after something?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a different challenge. The first day I likened back to a swim meet, back in the old school when I was a little kid and you were doing 4 or 5 races every day for, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But it was, tried to take a similar approach to that, where it was, you warmed up well before every event, did the event, and then cooled down at least a little bit. And then you sort of sat around for as long as you could, and then you warmed up again to get ready for the next event. And then at night, sort of the same thing, you're smart about what you eat, really, really focused on hydration. I'll pitch First Endurance, one of my sponsors, because I think their electrolyte drink and their recovery drink are hands down the best out there. So a big part of it was getting down the calories at night and getting down the recovery drinks right after the events to try and maximize the body recovery nutritionally. And then just, foam rolling, stretching. I took an ice bath after the first day. Just all the little things. In a perfect world, you'd be able to fly, a masseuse and a body worker in and really do it up. But with what we had, I think there were people that had Normatec boots. That was another trick people tried to use at night to get that little bit of an edge going into the next day. But I think it's sort of just like a big training block. If you have a big weekend of training, you're at home and you're an amateur triathlete and you're juggling, say, a long ride on Saturday, and then you got to run off, and then a long run on Sunday, and you've got kids at home and whatever else you got to do. It's similar. I mean, if you're trying to maximize your performance in those specific workouts, you've got to be really, really smart about what you do in between. Stay on top of your food, stay on top of your hydration in particular. And make sure you're just doing all the little things you can do. You can stretch, anywhere, and you can foam roll at night while you're watching TV, and just those little things that I think we sort of take for granted a lot when we're just training, because you're kind of like, well, you're just training. You're actually trying to maximize your training to go into each session as ready as possible. So sort of we took the same approach to that race. Obviously, we were trying to go as fast as we could each day, and like you say, the fact that there was only 10 guys were going to make the final, and what you did the first 2 days was going to matter in your final finish, it made it so that you couldn't ever really take your foot off the gas. I mean, you had to go full on every race, and that just made both the recovery and the prep going into it that much more important.
Yeah. And do you think there's room for more of this type of format in the triathlon world, or do you think it's kind of something that has to be an end of season thing because of the intensity, and this is probably perfectly placed for that? I mean, do you see growth here, or kind of this is a niche race that has its special place?
No, I mean, well, I think it definitely, it because of the location and because of, Mark Holowesko is a huge supporter of endurance sports. And the race wouldn't happen without him. So having him sort of be the backing of the race is huge. Being able to use his island and all of that is fantastic. But I think that there is certainly a place where you could grow this, whether it be, a 2 or 3 race series maybe throughout the year.
Yeah.
And then have the final race at the Island House at the end of the season and make that sort of the way you qualify to get to there. I mean, I don't know how well you could do a similar format for a large age group field. Like they had a CEO challenge at this year's race. They had 10 CEOs out there that did exactly what we did. And that was cool. I mean, they got to see it. They got to watch us. They got to do it firsthand. They all loved it. They had a blast. And I think you could maybe do small age group fields like that. But I think more than anything, it's a great way to go about professional triathlon in a more mainstream sense. I mean,
absolutely,
it has all those aspects that people like to watch. When people watch Kona on TV, they love the grittiness and the fact that it's super hard. And this isn't something that just anybody could jump off the couch and do. And while Kona is super long, and that's what makes it hard to the lame person, this is super fast. It's over and over again. It's sort of the decathlon of triathlon. I mean, there's only 3 events, but they're all different distances. They're different speeds. And I think so. Yeah, I think it could certainly grow. I think it would need the right supporters. I think it would certainly take a fair amount of upfront investment on the part of whoever was putting it on, because I think you do need to do the TV piece and the live coverage piece well. But I think if you can get those things right, absolutely it could grow. And I think it's great for the sport of triathlon because it is something a little bit different. And not that triathlon's really stagnating, but it is sort of, you've got Ironman and then you sort of got everything else. And there's not, the landscape, at least for the pros, is getting smaller and smaller as far as races, with a lot of Olympic distance races going away, with the Lifetime Series not being around anymore.
Yeah.
That's sort of lending itself to, if you're a pro triathlete, you've either got to do Ironman or you've got to do ITU.
Right.
And I think those are extremely cool aspects of triathlon, but I think there's another part to it. And I think this is a perfect mix of both, because you have both long course athletes, short course athletes, non-draft, drafting. Everybody's on the same course doing the same stuff. And you're getting to actually go head to head with people that you wouldn't necessarily race. I mean, I've never raced Mario Mola in my life, and he's the reigning ITU world champion, and he was there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And Richard Murray was just missed medal at the Olympics. He was 4th, I think, and he won the race. And then you had, Tim Don, who currently races long course, but was a 4-time short course ITU world champion. So I think just the mix of all the athletes, it's more like a traditional professional sport. I mean, when you think of like pro golf or pro tennis or pro basketball, like there's one thing, right? Everybody's playing the same game. They're trying to do it the best they can, and the best is the absolute best. Triathlon's a little different because you've got so many different ways you can be a pro triathlete. You can be a pro 70.3 guy. You can be a pro Ironman guy. You can be a pro ITU athlete. And the same person, unless you're Jan Frodeno, can't do all of those.
Yeah.
So it's a way to sort of find out, like you said originally when you introed it, the Island House was sort of a way to get, okay, who's the best triathlete in the bunch? Who's the guy that can swim, bike, and run the most consistently and the best? And so I think from that aspect, it absolutely could grow, and you could have, whether it be a series or just a couple races throughout the year. But I think there's definitely a place for it to grow, and a lot of good that it can do for both professional triathlon from a marketing sense and from getting the sport on TV and more mainstream, but also for the age groupers. I mean, it's super fun to watch. And if you had small age group fields or a way for the age groupers to participate, whether it be, a sprint race and then they get to hang out and watch the pros race, I think it'd be a great way to do it. And it's short. It's 3 days in a row, but really the recovery wasn't as bad as you might think, just because everything was so short. I mean, I think you certainly pull up better even from the 3rd day of that than you would from, say, an Ironman where you were going for 8 straight hours.
Yeah.
So I don't think it has to be at the end of the year. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to try and do another huge race the next weekend, but that said, Terenzo and Ellie Salthouse both won Miami 70.3 the weekend before, and then 5 days later was the first day of Island House, and they both were top 5, I believe.
Yeah.
So not only did they make the final 10, they actually were in the top half of the final 10. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome for the sport. I think, Luke and Beth and Mark have done a fantastic job of building the race because it was a little bit different last year, and they grew it this year, and they doubled the field. And I think it'll continue to grow and be fantastic for the sport of triathlon.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I'm a little biased because I love triathlon, but I think this would be a perfect format to make it more mainstream and have the casual fan enjoy it. And it just would appeal to so many people. And it's just such an interesting, format. So yeah, I'm with you on it. I think they should expand it, get it on TV, get it, do all that kind of stuff, because it will be really good for the sport. So one final question, because we're almost out of time, is, what does your 2017 plans look like? Have you started planning that out yet, or are you still thinking through it?
A little bit of both. I mean, I've certainly started looking at it. I think the biggest things will be hitting the races that I've always enjoyed and done well at, the few short course races that are left. The St. Anthony's, New York, Cape from Alcatraz. I'd love to go back to Beijing and do that race again. And then throwing in a couple 70.3s and potentially going to 70.3 Worlds, since it is back in the States this year and the trip's a little bit easier. I've got 2 little kids, so I can only leave the U.S. and go to the other side of the world so many times in a year.
Yeah.
So I'd say on the whole, it'll be very similar to last year. But I may actually try and focus on 70.3 Worlds this year, depending on how the first part of the season plays out. But yeah, definitely supporting the short course races that have been around for a long time. We just found out last week that the Boulder Peak is actually going to bring back a pro field, which is fantastic because that's such an iconic race that has so much history to it. And it's in Boulder, where you can have basically a world-class field, roll out of bed and go to the res in the morning. So I'm excited about that coming back. I mean, like I say, it was one of the first races I ever did. And excited to do that and support the short course races that are still around, and then add in a few long course races where they fit the schedule.
Cool. Well, I look forward to cheering you on in New York City. I'll be on the sidelines watching that one. Again, I'm doing Lake Placid Ironman. I think it's the weekend after, so I'm definitely not going to be racing New York City, but I will be there cheering. So looking forward to it. And Cam, thank you, so much for your time today, and thanks for sharing a little bit about these races and some of your tips and experiences. I think it's really interesting, and I enjoyed it, and I know the listeners will.
Awesome. No, thank you very much, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.